Hi, Dr. Zoe. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. So nice to be talking to you. I'm glad that we arranged the schedules. Here is 1 p.m. So I usually in the mornings is crazy because I have two kids, six dogs, three rabbits, and a turtle.
Oh, amazing.
Yes, it's a crazy house. So in the mornings, I have to give them lunch and organize everything to send them to school. And then my husband takes them. So it's really crazy in the mornings, but in the afternoons, I can work more and have more like concentrated things to do. So everything I do in the afternoon. So
That
it's
makes sense.
great. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's great. So I'm really excited about talking to you because it's a really new field, like especially for me that I entered in the ABA world because of autism. So it's pretty much all about autism and everything. So in my case, for example, I stay studying about autism itself, child development in all the areas, and ABA and the way that ABA enters and all that. But I always like to tell people to see beyond. And sometimes they will not want to work with kids with autism, and that's okay. Especially psychology students, because they are the most ones that see ABA in college. So people from education degrees and SLPs, OTs, like they don't see a lot of ABA, almost nothing. SLPs, when they study about language development and all Chomsky versus Skinner, they see all that, but not so much. So I think that ABA can bring so much to the table to everyone, to everyone's work. So I always like to start asking which is your background and how you came into ABA and ABA for gerontology. So that would be my first question, especially because I know how the background education works in the United States and Canada, but I don't know much about the UK. So please tell us all about that and which
Sure.
is your major, your background on your education.
Yeah. So you're right. The UK is a little bit different to the
Okay.
USA.
Okay.
So essentially, what we call college is between 16 and 18 years old.
Okay.
So it's kind of what the Americans consider high school, but we have high school till 16, and then 16 to 18 you go to college. Um, and that was the first time I got to study psychology. And I did, you study for 2 years, and we get what's called an A level out of it, which is kind of your qualification at that level. So that was the first time that I discovered psychology. And my mum worked with people with disabilities. And I'd gone to, like the Christmas party for the people that they supported. And I'd met people with disabilities, and I was like, oh, okay, I think this is something that I'd like to do. I'd like to work with people with disabilities.
But like
So then I knew that psychology, adults,
adults. Okay.
yes, adults with disabilities and adults with autism. And I thought that's where I wanted to go. Um, so I knew that I wanted to do psychology. So I did psychology at college level, and then I decided to go on to university to do psychology at university. Now that's where our undergraduate or bachelor's degree in the UK is a little bit different to the USA, because in the USA they tend to have the general education degree, and we don't do that. You go straight in and do generally 3 years is your bachelor's degree, and you do it in the subject that you study. So mine was 3 years of just psychology. We didn't do kind of the maths and all the other
it's much
subjects.
more, it matches our system here, because here it's like that. I didn't know that about UK. Interesting, because here you choose, like, you want to do law school, psychology, pedagogy, for example, and you stay there studying that for 4 years to 5 years. It depends of the course. For example, psychology is 5 years, law is 5 years, pedagogy are 4 years. So it depends. And you study also just that, like it's your course, it will be your profession.
Yes. And we don't do the kind of major and minor US style thing. Some people do like joint, so they might do psychology and French or something, but that's quite unusual. Generally you do one, what we would consider a course, and you just do that. So I studied psychology, and for many years I wanted to be a clinical psychologist, and I think all behavioral analysts at one point have decided that they want to be a clinical psychologist, and I thought that's what I wanted to do. And we didn't have any ABA. There was nothing in our first year of undergraduate degree. Then in the second year there was about 2 weeks where we had 1 hour a week, I think it was, and it was on learning, but it was taught by a behavioral analyst. And that was when I first came into contact with the idea that ABA could be used with, or this thing called ABA could be used with people or children with disabilities and children with autism. And I was like, oh, wow, that's where I need to go. That's what I want. So then luckily in the third year, you get some choice over your module. So in the first and second year, you have to take what's in the course. And then in the third year, you get to pick. We call classes modules in the UK. A class is like the individual, I'm going to class on this day, whereas the module is kind of like the series of classes. So I in the third year, we could take a whole module on ABA. So that was when I first really got into it. Now, I thought I wanted to work with typically developing children by this point. So I knew that I wanted to work with children, but I thought it was typically developing children that I was interested in. And I was very fortunate that the university that I went to, Bangor, is one of only, I think it's 4 in the UK that do a master's in ABA. So ABA is kind of a few years behind the USA in terms of the infrastructure in the UK. But we do have, I think it's either 4 or 5 universities in the UK that has a master's degree in ABA. So I went on to do the master's degree, absolutely loved it. And as part of that, I was really lucky. I got onto an exchange program. So I did 6 months in Bangor in the UK. And then I went and did 6 months in Warsaw in Poland, in Eastern Europe. And then I went over and did a year in California.
Wow.
So I actually ended up doing 2 master's degrees in ABA, split over 2 years, but 1 master's thesis. And that master's thesis I did in a pigeon lab. Because I was like, wow, there's a pigeon lab in California. I'm not going to pass up the opportunity to have a go in a pigeon lab. So I did my master's thesis actually in a pigeon lab. So different again. But while I was in
behavior analysis.
Pardon?
More experimental behavior analysis.
So the course in the UK was more applied behavior analysis.
Okay.
In the US, it was kind of the applied and the more basic stuff.
Okay.
So
basic research. Okay.
Yeah, it was kind of, we had more of both ends, whereas in the UK it was more just the applied side. So I got to study all the philosophical aspects, which I'd never encountered before, and I got to study the experimental stuff as well as all the applied aspects. So I loved that. I just generally love ABA. All areas of ABA, I'm just like, oh, this is amazing. So one of the things while I was in California, we had a class that was like different applications of ABA, where there was, I think, one paper about behavioral gerontology. And at that point, I was like, okay, that's cool. I still want to work with kids, but it's cool that it can be done with old people as well. And didn't really think much more of it at that point. So when I moved back to the UK, I then started working with children with autism, and I worked on home programs, and I did some tutoring, and I did some kind of I collected my hours to sit the BCBA exam, and I loved the families that I worked with, and loved the children that I worked with. But it just wasn't for me. I realized that I don't think I do actually want to work with children, not long term anyway. I like I say, I love the children that I worked with, and I love the families that I worked with. But just in terms of where I could see myself working long term, it wasn't on home programs, and I didn't feel like it was going to be in schools. It was just something was missing. So I did that for a few years and decided, okay, nope, I need to go and figure out what it is that I need to do. And then I saw a PhD come up. Now, PhDs are a little bit different. Again, in the UK, generally, they're a bit different to the USA. In the USA, they tend to have the programs where there's a certain number of people or places each year, and it's repeated year on year. That's not the case for most PhDs in the UK. There's, for clinical psychology and things, it's like that. But for kind of ABA, it's almost like a job. It's a temporary job. There's one place, generally, with funding, and one person, you interview for it, one person will get that place. They do it for 3 years and that's it. It's not repeated. It's not like you have classmates. And there are no classes. You don't take classes in a PhD in the UK. You deliver the classes and you do your research. So I was fortunate enough, I found a PhD that was with older adults with dementia. And at that point, I was like, oh, actually, that sounds really cool. And I don't think there's very much research out there in this area, at least compared to autism.
Sure.
And I was like, do you know what? That sounds like something I definitely enjoy. And I was fortunate enough to get the place on that PhD. So that's kind of my journey into ABA, and then discovering behavioral gerontology. And once I'd started in behavioral gerontology, and I actually started working with clients with dementia, I was like, oh yeah, this is it. This is where I'm meant to be. And from that point, I mean, I haven't looked back. There's such a wonderful population to work with. And there's so many misconceptions and stereotypes of older people. And I'm sure I used to hold them as well, where I think, oh, well, they're going to die soon anyway, so what's the point? And it's like, no, actually, surely this is the most vital. If you think they're probably going to die soon, then surely you want to improve their quality of life so that they have the best quality for the last few years of their life. Like, if anything, we're running out of time. We need to do what we can, and to make a difference. So that's been where I am, and that's where I did. So I did 3 years of research with older adults with dementia, in care homes, and also with people with learning disabilities and dementia, or intellectual disabilities and dementia, for those 3 years. And I also kind of taught, and straight after my PhD, I worked for Bangor University and I taught some classes in ABA. And then temporarily I did a short-term job actually developing a sexual violence training network across the university. So completely different again. But I knew that I was carrying on in gerontology, and that's when I'd come out the other side. I defended my PhD. I did my viva 2 days after the pandemic hit. Wow. So I was the first person to defend their viva from our university, at least via Zoom. Mm-hmm. And because of obviously the pandemic and everything, and things that were going on with the university, it meant that I decided that I wanted to move away. And that's why when we decided, I was like, God, there's such a need for behavioral gerontology in the UK. Like the care homes that I work with would call me up and be like, okay, so what are you doing next? Can we take part in your next research study? When are you coming to visit us next? So they really wanted what we could provide, and they weren't getting it elsewhere. They're not getting it elsewhere. Older adult services are kind of desperately underfunded in general. I mean, that's across the world, but we see that in the UK. And the care homes that I worked with really wanted what we could do that no one else could do. So that's why myself and my colleague Emma, who's also a behavioural analyst who works with older adults with dementia, kind of got together and said, well, it's now or never. Why don't we? If no one else is doing this, no one else is providing these services, why don't we give it a shot? Sure. So and that's where we are now. Obviously, we've started Positive Aging Consultancy and Training, or PACT for short, which is our behavioural gerontology services that we provide to older adults with dementia. And we're kind of only a few months old now, but that's kind of where we are. We're kind of providing services privately, and hopefully very soon through social services as well. So through state-funded programs, which would be even better in my opinion, because I would rather
escalate and attend more people. And one question, so many questions, I'm really curious about all of that. Many things passed inside my head while you were talking about. So what kinds of service nowadays on the positive
aging consultancy and training. PACT, yeah.
Big name. So what are exactly the kind of service that you provide? So we can have, for example, a place that I'm sorry, I forgot the name in English. Does it have some places that like people live, like homes for for old people, for example, where they live? Because here in Brazil is a little different culturally. I don't know if UK and the US are the same, but here we still have lots of it's not so common to see like the idea of you letting your mother, your father, your beloved one out there in a clinic or in a home facility. Usually people who have the resources, many times the parents go live with some of their children their kids, or they hire someone to take care of them, and it's not like in so many cases that you have like home facilities. Usually this happens to people who does not have lots of resources. It's more like what I see through life. My parents, for example, they are really young. My mother, she's 59, and my father, he's 58. So they are, I consider them really young. They work, they are really active. But for me as a child, I see a really hard thing, like to let them live somewhere else in a home facility or something like that. So I don't know how is culturally the idea in the UK.
Yeah, I think we're somewhere in between. So most older adults in the UK live at home independently. Okay. So if they're kind of, say, for example, husband and wife or a married couple, or they will live in their own home, and they might, as they get older, move to maybe a bungalow so there's no stairs, or they might have lots of adaptations done, so ramps and hand things to hold, so to help them get around. Generally, people try and stay living independently for as long as possible, with extra care that would come in if they need it. So it might be that you have someone come in twice a day to do the washing up and to make sure you've taken your medication and things like that. and family might do that as well. But generally in the UK, or one of the biggest risk factors is when someone becomes incontinent. So when someone's no longer able to get themselves to the toilet in time, that's usually one of the points where people are considered for moving into a care facility.
Is a risk factor. You can fall down. Many things bad could happen with this situation.
Yes, and falls are another big one. If someone's had a number of falls and they've hurt themselves or had to have a number of hospital trips, then there'll be an ongoing kind of risk assessments to see, are they able to look after themselves at home adequately? Can we provide support to keep them at home? Because ultimately it costs less to keep them at home than it does to put them into care. Mm-hmm. So the goal is to keep them at home. That's not always the case, and it's not always the most appropriate, but that's the goal where possible. When someone does need to move into care, there's kind of two broad places where they can go, either a care home or a nursing home. So the care home is for people who don't necessarily have lots of medical needs, but they have care needs. So it might be, like, say, incontinence, or they might have trouble getting in and out of bed, or they might have trouble remembering to eat or to take their medication, or physically just struggle, quite frail. So that's the kind of person that would be supported in a care home. Then we have nursing homes. Now, nursing homes are staffed by nurses, whereas care homes are staffed by care assistants. Nursing homes as nurses and care staff. So there, generally, you'll find people who have higher medical needs. So these are people who have lots of health conditions. They might need a lot more intensive over kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Someone to oversee their medical conditions on a day-to-day basis. And generally, by the time someone gets towards the end of life stage, they'll go to a nursing home or a kind of end of life facility. So those are kind of the main two areas. Now what we do have in the UK is places called EMI homes, which stands for elderly mentally infirm, which is a horrible phrase. It's a really, really antiquated phrase. But those are facilities that are specifically catering for people with dementia. So the idea is that those places will better support people with more challenging behaviour, or people who place a slightly higher burden on the staffing requirements, because maybe they wander and someone needs to be keeping tabs on them at all times to make sure they're not disappearing off, or maybe they are really resistive to personal care, or whatever it is. Those are kind of the places that generally cater to people with dementia.
Okay. So all of those places could hire the services of your agency, and usually what are they seeking for? What they look for when they go to look for the service of your agency?
Yeah, so I mean, we will literally take referrals from anyone, whether it's a clinical psychologist, whether it's a speech and language therapist, a care home, an individual. It might be a spouse, a husband, a wife. We will take a referral from whoever wants to contact us. Okay. But generally, by the time someone reaches out to us, they're at breaking point. Generally, they've tried everything else. They maybe have a relative who is engaging in really severe challenging behaviour, who has gone to a care home and has then been evicted, has moved to another place, has been evicted again, and is looking at maybe another eviction. So that's usually the point where people will reach out for support. So what we can provide is our kind of core service is the behavioural assessment and intervention. I mean, we'll do full analysis of the behaviour, your typical function analysis, preference assessments, all sorts of whatever we need to analyse, basically, to figure out what's going on. Then we design intervention. we obviously test it out, all your kind of very typical behavior analytic responsibilities. And then we also insist, so as part of that package, so we kind of charge a flat rate for the whole thing. And as part of that, we always include staff training or carer training, because what tends to happen in a lot of cases is people will get a report from a professional and it will say, oh, great, do this, 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 this. They give them a report and they leave. Mm-hmm. And that's no use to anyone. So we kind of always include that carer training in our services to make sure that everyone's competent in what they need to do before we leave. And then we'll kind of do follow-ups and make sure that there's nothing going wrong. So that's our main service. That's kind of the main thing that we do. What we also do is provide staff trainings. So we'll do trainings on, say, functions of behavior. We'll do trainings on communication and how to work with someone who's got very impaired communication skills, someone with more advanced dementia. We might look at how to promote independence. So essentially, we're talking about prompting and prompt fading, but just applied
task analysis, functional behavior that they could do by themselves.
Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of, but obviously these are for care staff who've never heard of ABA in their entire lives. So we teach it in a way that's obviously more palatable and in English, in real English, not behavioral English. So yeah, those are our kind of core services that we provide to clients. And then on the other side of things, we also do supervision for BCBAs, because obviously to get into behavioral gerontology, you've got to get some extra training and extra supervision. But it's really hard to find because there's so few people doing it, and the people that are doing it are often so busy. So that was something that was really important to us, is to make sure that we've always got time to train up the next generation of behavioral gerontologists. And then we also produce CEUs as well. So we do online courses in behavioral gerontology. And those that we specifically write those for people who have never heard of behavioral gerontology, but who know about ABA with other populations. So people who work with children with autism or people with disabilities who are like, I didn't know you could use ABA with older adults. So we kind of write the courses specifically for people who are in that situation.
And those children with disabilities, they will grow up. So we need to be prepared for that. Like I told you that I have a son. So he's 9 years old. He will be doing 10 years old in the end of the year. So I think a lot about that. Like he will be a grown up. So are we prepared for that? So we definitely are not. And most of people, they like to work with little kids. They are cuter. They are. Yeah. It's a good job. But in my case, for example, I never worked with so little kids. Usually it was 5 years old, 11, like adolescents. I love working with adolescents, teenagers. So, and we need to be prepared to deal with the sexual area that it's like a thing that we don't talk about. We don't see. Yeah. We pretend that it's not happening. It will never happen. So that's our areas that I am going into, because all I see is everyone getting their certifications and studying about for kids, and I always listen that for adults, families. So I always receive messages saying, "Oh, I have a 33, I have a 40-year-old son or daughter." And clinics, they don't take them, they don't take us. Yeah. And I always think, okay, someone needs to do that. Yes. And what we will do with all those kids that today they are kids, but they will grow. So what will be done with those kids? We will, okay, these kids will not receive services anymore. So we cannot do that. We need to prepare like for yesterday, but it's in time yet. So I think
and as well, just to add to that, so people with disabilities are much more likely to develop dementia than people without disabilities, and they're more likely to develop at an earlier age. And particularly people with Down syndrome are, I think they develop dementia on average 10 to 15 years earlier than the general population. So it's even more crucial in that population, because we seem to forget that people with a disability can grow old.
Yeah,
they can, and they still need support. And actually, you need to be aware, because what happens is diagnostic overshadowing, where you've got someone who has a disability, they get to their 50s, their 60s, and they start engaging in some weird behavior, and people just go, oh, it's just because they have a disability. That's what they're doing. And actually, unless you're aware that sometimes what those behaviors can mean is that they are developing dementia, like you wouldn't know. People just attribute it to their disability rather than to dementia or development of dementia. And it's really important that you know the difference, so that you can support someone differently. And so things like with dementia, it can affect perception. So you can start, some people struggle with walking because they can't, their depth perception is off, so they can't tell that how far away the floor is or the step is. So then they fall because they're not putting enough pressure, or they're not walking in the right way. So if you think that, oh, it's just they just don't want to walk today, they're just causing problems because they don't want to walk. I know, actually, it's because
being lazy or tired.
Yes,
that's really the biggest excuse. Yes, totally makes sense. And it's not that the diagnostics is really important, but it gives us a whole new perception and more clarity on things and how we will handle. We will still be looking for behaviors, but on a different perspective. Is really different that, okay, he's being lazy, or he's really tired, he's having sleep issues, and no, it's another thing. No, it's because of he has troubles on when he's walking, so this makes him want to walk less. Yes. So what can we do to support that and give him a more pleasant way that he can walk, because he needs but give support for them to be able to do that.
Absolutely. Yes. And I completely agree with you. So I don't care
the name
of diagnosis is.
Yes.
Like I don't care,
yeah,
but I still want to know. So because it can inform what I'm going to expect or how I interpret things. So, for example, I mean, dementia, there's 100 different conditions. Dementia is just an umbrella term for 100 plus different conditions, all of which can look different. So people think of Alzheimer's disease, which is kind of...
This would be my question, because I'm totally new into that. So I'm going to... I will do a really dumb question. I'm sorry, but Alzheimer would be inside the dementia?
Yeah, so dementia is the broad term.
Okay.
And then Alzheimer's is the most common type of dementia. So dementia is just a term for a collection of conditions. Okay. But it might be that you're diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, which is one type, or you might have vascular dementia, which is a different type. And they can look very, very different. So we think of Alzheimer's as about 60+% of people have Alzheimer's. So that is the one that people think of, where people are forgetful or a bit confused, or they're not quite sure where they are or what's happening. But if you look at, say, someone with vascular dementia, which is the second most common type of dementia, this is caused by kind of mini strokes in the brain. So it's lack of oxygen getting to certain parts of the brain. So it's essentially little strokes or little bits of brain damage. Now, with vascular dementia, you can have no changes to memory. So someone's memory can be perfectly intact and they remember everything and can talk to you about what happened earlier today and yesterday, and everything's correct. But what you might see is changes in personality. So huge changes in what they're likely to do. You might see changes in the way that they walk because of the perceptual difficulties. You might see people picking at the wallpaper because the wallpaper is slightly textured and they think it's something that they can pick up. So there's all these other things, and things like in some types of dementia, there's hallucinations and delusions. So people might see things or see people that aren't there, or be paranoid that someone's stealing their items, which is completely reasonable. If you're somebody, if you've put your bag down somewhere and then forgotten that you've put it down and you walk away and then you can't find your bag, it's more reasonable to think that someone's stolen it than to think that you've forgotten your bag, because you're a grown-up, you're an adult with a fully functioning life. Why would you forget your bag? That's not normal. So it's more likely that someone's stolen it. So that's, and the other thing that's interesting is the way, obviously dementia is a progressive illness, so people get worse over time. And there are drugs to slow it down, but there's no way to stop it. We can't stop someone deteriorating, and we can't halt it or reverse it. But the way that they progress or deteriorate depends on the type of dementia. So, for example, in Alzheimer's disease, it's a very slow, steady progression. So they just generally get worse and worse over time. In vascular dementia, they're absolutely at the same level for a while, and then they'll suddenly have another mini stroke and you get a sudden drop in their skill level. And then they'll be fine at that level for a while, and then they'll have another drop. So it's really important to know, say, for example, if someone's got Alzheimer's disease and I come in one day and suddenly they can't do what they could do 2 days ago, that's concerning to me. There's something else going on. If I see that in vascular dementia, I'm still going to look for the causes, but I might be more ready to accept that it's part of their dementia, as in they've had another mini stroke and they've lost skills. So it's really the diagnosis, it doesn't make a difference to how we would support someone in that respect, but it informs our decision making.
Yeah, sure, definitely. It's like I compare that with stereotypes. We have a bad image on ABA with autism. I'm sure you were aware about that we want to stop stereotypic behaviors, and we don't want kids to do stereotypes. And it's not that. We just don't want them to do just that.
Yes.
And it's stereotypy is part of autism, is one of the symptoms and the behaviors that we have. So I always tell parents, okay, you will not have a kid without stereotypes. This will not happen because we don't have the cure for autism. So there is no therapy that the kid could do in a whole world, and he could do like 30 hours of therapy and everything and have the best of the best. We will not do that. Like good therapy, good ABA therapy, who respects the individual. Like I'm a mom also, so I don't want my kid to don't do it. My son, he's a verbal kid, so he communicates. So usually I ask him, so why are you doing that? And he says to me, oh, because I like it. It makes me feel good. And I say, okay, you can do it. And I just like regulate the times when he's doing some activity, or when we are in some place like the movie theater, for example, and he's doing lots of noise. And I tell him, okay, here it's not okay to do that because we are supposed to be in silent, okay? And then he understands me and he says, okay, I got it. So it's so good to see him like expressing himself, and we totally respect that. But I get it that we had some therapists in the past, or even nowadays, who usually don't do that, who don't respect, and then ABA took like a bad image. So And I always say, oh, what this kid, like, we have some adult who speaks bad things about ABA, and I usually read that and I think, oh, but what he's saying, this is not ABA.
Yes.
That's not true. And I always stay thinking, oh, this is such a misunderstanding. He's saying something, but that's not the truth. That's not how things work. So I always try to do my best to inform people and to say, please don't do that, to therapists. Oh, don't do that. Please do not hold the kid. You do this like just in the last resources, because,
Yes.
for example, my child, he was holding up for a therapist. So we have really bad images that like cuts our heart to see. And the person was telling us that she was an ABA therapist and she was doing ABA. And I went to study, and today I see, oh, okay, that's not ABA.
Yes.
I usually show those videos in private for our students, and I tell them, okay, what you were going to see now, that's not ABA. So that's what you will never do. And usually they even cry, sing, because he's crying and he's just a baby. He was with like 3 years old and crying and suffering. And it was really hard for us, but I used that as, okay, so let's train people in order for no other kid pass for this situation and no other family. So that's what I try to do, like every day, informing everyone. And like, okay, you need to see this as a science, that it's not like a cake recipe that I could give to you. You need to think, you need to learn how to think on this perspective.
And I think that's really interesting, because we actually, I mean, we've not even been going very long, but we get random abuse on our social media pages from people who say ABA is abuse. And I think, don't get me wrong, I will always listen to people who have experienced what's been done and been claimed to be ABA that is absolutely not ABA. And I think we really need to validate their experiences,
their feelings. Yes,
there's issues that do need to be sorted, and no one, I don't think anyone would object to that. But I always find it interesting when those things are put on our, say, for example, on our social media pages. And I'm like, hold on, but what is your objection to what we do? Because we don't work with children with autism. I'm not trying to stop someone being autistic. Like I don't work with people with autism. So, and we also, obviously, I work with older adults. I don't do any discrete trial teaching. I don't do any academic skills. I don't do rote learning. All of my work is looking at independent skills and functional analysis and functional assessment, and mostly antecedent based. And I'd love to know almost what is the objection to me changing the way that the care staff interact with a client to make it more enjoyable for them. How is that abusive? It's a very naive outlook, because again, ABA is a science. It is not a treatment for autism, and it's not something that's trying to stop people being autistic or being their authentic selves. All it's doing is trying to change the world that they experience, so that world is more enjoyable and reinforcing and builds them up rather than brings them down. And I can't see, when that's done ethically, how anyone could have an issue with it. Now, that's me being naive.
with your population, you still receive those like negatives, or I don't know, maybe some doctor or facility or other psychologists that receive as a bad thing, as could be abusive or something like that?
It's interesting because I tend to say behavioral gerontology, not ABA, because people know ABA, people have never heard of behavioral gerontology.
Okay.
So purely from a marketing perspective, I tend to avoid the word ABA, which is very sad, until I get to know someone and they already have a good learning history with me, then I'll use the word.
Yeah.
But care homes, no issue, absolutely no issue. They see the value in what we do. They see no issue at all because they see it as just, well, this person comes in and helps us improve care, and
they see results.
Yeah,
it speaks for itself.
Yeah, the people that I mean, we get random trolls on the internet posting, and they haven't a clue. They've never seen us before. All they know is that the word ABA is on our website, and we're talking about ABA with older adults. So they assume they know what they understand what ABA is. And I think yesterday I had someone who just say ABA is abuse, ban ABA. Yeah. And it's like, well, okay, but do you know what it means in regards to older adults? Have you seen what it looks like with a different population? Or do you just have a very narrow view of what you think it is that is disconnected from the real world or from what is actually ABA in modern day? So I think in that respect, from other professionals, if someone hears ABA, they might have a negative, they might know something. I tend to avoid that until I know someone better. Generally, I haven't had much negative from other professionals in the field, not with older adults anyway. So I've kind of been lucky in that respect. But it is generally unheard of in the UK.
Yeah. In Europe, do you see like UK and you also went to Poland? Do you see more people more not so open to ABA and more open to other lines of work and other science?
Yeah, definitely. We unfortunately have the bad PR that ABA has in other countries. We have in the UK as well, and there's a lot happening in the UK. So obviously, when the BACB made their announcement about the shift in international focus, the UK was lucky to get an extension. Now we have the UK Society for Behaviour Analysis, and they have been pushing forward with regulation in the UK. So they've now applied for us to become a regulated profession. So we would be, hopefully, fingers crossed, when this goes through and gets approved, we will be regulated by the same people that regulate clinical psychologists and neuropsychologists. So that will be really good for us in the UK, because that will give us the same standard, and that puts us in the same standing as clinical psychologists. But they've been working really hard on a registry for professionals. And I think that's going to make a big difference to our field, because historically, I don't know if you know, in the UK, we don't have the insurance style medical model of the US.
Oh, really? But the insurance don't cover ABA or don't cover anything at all?
We don't have that insurance. We just don't have that model. Okay. So we have, for health, we have the National Health Service, the NHS, which is our national socialism kind of service. So if you go to the hospital, it's free. If you go to the doctors, it's free. You never pay. You pay for, I think you pay £9 per prescription, but it doesn't matter what it is. It's just, if you need an inhaler or if you need real expensive medication, it's £9, whatever. So we have that model of healthcare where it comes out of our taxes, we pay into it, and then all healthcare in that respect is free in the UK, or free at the point of use. For ABA, in America, it seems to become under healthcare. In the UK, it's not considered healthcare, so it's not provided on the NHS. It comes under education and social care. And in the UK, again, we have social care through our local authorities, so that's done on a local level. And at the moment, what happens in the UK is the parents that can afford ABA pay for it privately. They usually pay for it for a few years, or a year or two. They get the evidence that it's working with their child, and then they go to their local authority and challenge the local authority's offer. So the local authority will say, okay, you've got a child with additional needs. Here's our plan for your child. and we want them to go to this special school, and we're going to give them this teaching assistant for this many hours. And the parents will go back and say, no, this is inadequate. I want ABA, and look at all the evidence. Inevitably, the local authority will say, not a chance, it costs too much, and we don't support that. And then quite often what happens is the parents have to hire a solicitor, and they have to go to an education tribunal, which is kind of the legal, it's kind of almost like going to court, but it's not quite like that. It's a tribunal.
It's before the court. So
it's kind of like a different system
in between.
And then quite often what will happen, and when I was working with kids with autism, what happened for a few of my clients is we had to threaten with going to a tribunal and get reports from educational psychologists and clinical psychologists and speech and language therapists, all saying, look at how amazing this is working for this child, threaten to go to a tribunal. And usually the local authority would settle, and they'd say, okay, we don't want to pay to go for a tribunal. You can have what you want, or here's our counter offer. We wanted ABA for 30 hours a week. We'll give it you for 20. So that's what happens. Now, some local authorities will stand very hard. They'll go to tribunal, and occasionally they'll win. More often than not now, I think, at least from what I can see, more local authorities are agreeing to pay for ABA. But the problem that we've had is that because it's not been very well regulated, there's been a real variation in the quality. So you've got some who are providing their BCBAs, they've got lots of experience, and they're providing really good quality ABA. And then you've got people who are working who have no qualifications, or they have the qualification but have no experience, no supervision, or are not receiving adequate supervision. And they're doing really dodgy stuff that under the name of ABA. And that's what's caused a lot of the issues, I think, in the UK, is this huge variation in what people experience. So I'm hoping for autism services in the UK, getting our profession on this professional council will make a big difference to the regulation of our services and make it much easier to get rid of those that aren't doing a good job.
Yeah, we have the same here in Brazil. So we are really behind of, in the UK, they have to create a law in order to create a profession, because here in Brazil we have professions created by a law. So we have a law that regulates this is done by the government, who that regulates psychology, law, for example, and then we have councils, like we have boards. We could say this name that it is boards, but this is a public institution. It's not a private institution. That's why, for example, the BACB would not fit here, because we can't have a private institution regulating something. We only can have the government regulating a profession and everything. In the UK, so the profession, like you told me, that it has the UK Society of Behavior Analysis. So this place would have the power to regulate things.
Yeah, so they will be, as far as I understand it now. I definitely don't understand it fully.
Yeah, sure.
As far as I know, so the UK Society for Behavior Analysis would regulate the profession, as in people would register with them. They would make sure that you have to have the criminal background check, you have to have professional insurance, you have to have a certain amount of training to go on their register, and they would be able to discipline people, and they have a standard of ethics, and they'd set their requirements to pass their exam. So they would do all the stuff that the BACB currently does for the UK. But then they would be regulated by I think it's the HCPC, the Healthcare Professional Council, I think, off the top of my head. But they are the ones that then regulate the UK SBA. I think that's how it works.
Okay.
So it would be, we get a registry that's then overseen by but I don't think they're a government body, but I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think they are at least related, but they're the professional body that does regulate all the
they have the power. They are the ones who do this kinds of stuff.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I got it. We are somewhere in between here. We have a really different organization of education and of practice. We don't have, for example, the practice of supervision in any of our professions.
Wow.
So the idea of the supervision, it's really different for all our educational system and practical system. So I understand the importance of a good supervision, not just like supervision. So the good supervision, to have someone, to have a mentor, to have someone who will help you, who will help you to be your best version. That's what I see in a supervision, but this is hard to get sometimes, but it's not our system. So someone gets out of university, for example, on psychology, and they can go and open their practices. They do like an internship while they are at the university. They do that, but they don't need someone like for the next 2 years or 3 years. And the same happens for the engineer. Law, you need to pass a board exam. That's the only thing. But this happens only at law and medical and medicine, that you need to do your residency and everything. But any other profession, we don't have those supervision systems. So it's hard. So we need to arrange a way to stay like in between, something that it's possible for our reality and our system. But it's something that it will give like good quality. That's why we invest so much in our post-graduation, because we try, we do our best to give like really good classes, and to discuss all those classes in we call here supervised practice, where we discuss cases. So they bring the cases and we discuss everyone, and I mediate all those discussions. So we try to do that. But it's not everyone who will have those kind of education that we provide, because we have different other places who gives the courses. So, and they will have different perspectives. So, but that's just the way we try to do things.
And I think one of my, it was so nice when you asked me whether I'd be willing to do a class for your module, because one of my personal pet peeves, and this was even before I got into gerontology, one of my pet peeves is that when people just teach ABA in relation to autism or in relation to education, because you end up with a practitioner that can only do one thing. And now, even if you want to only go into autism, there's so much more out there. And I think understanding how ABA applies to everything, literally everything in your life, ABA is happening, like behavior analysis is happening everywhere. I think that's so valuable, and recognizing how it can work, and recognizing that it's got to be adapted. So one of the mistakes that I made was thinking that I could take a standard functional analysis and do it with older adults. It doesn't work. You get all sorts of very strange results. And if you try and do an Iwata functional analysis with children, with adults with dementia, well, some of the clients that I worked with just turned around to me and said, "Excuse me, why aren't you talking to me right now? Have I done something strange? Have I done something wrong? Excuse me, please speak to me." And now if you've got a kid having a tantrum, you're like, okay, the behavior's increased in this condition. If you've got an older adult with dementia who's like, "Excuse me, you can't ignore that behavior." And they're tacting that something's odd. They're tacting that you've changed your behavior. And people forget if you focus all your training around clients who have an impaired social repertoire, so children with autism, people with disabilities, often, not always, but often have not full kind of social repertoires, but people with dementia have 80 odd years of having full social repertoire. Now, they might be struggling with communication or perception, or might be seeing things that aren't there. But they know when you're talking about them, and they know when you're being a little bit rude, and they know when you're implying something, or they know when you're speaking to them like a child. And you can't do any of that.
Yeah.
The way that you work has to change. I did preference assessments with older adults with dementia, and they felt weird. I ran them and I did them, but we got all sorts of odd things going on that it just didn't feel right to do a standard paired stimulus preference assessment. My clients would be like, oh, offer it to Betty because Betty would like one. Or, oh no, I don't mind, you pick which one you want. Now, I've never had a child with autism when I've done a preference assessment go, oh no, you pick.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen. But if you've got someone who's 87 who has spent their whole life making sure that everyone else's needs are met first, actually it's more reinforcing to them to give the items in your preference assessment to somebody else than it is to pick the items.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And I think that when we teach people these kinds of knowledge, we make them, even if they choose, okay, I like that, I'm interested on, but I want to be with autism, and that's okay. Or in your case, you went to autism and you went to do something else. Like, we need to give people this opportunity of knowledge.
Yes.
So, and when we give this, I think that even if they say, okay, that's good, but I like to be where I am working with autism population, this will make you a better professional, because
Absolutely.
you will have a more strong basis on, okay, yes, I really get it, the science. So I know that I can arrange this and that and the way that you were looking. So you will be a better professional with a more strong basis on ABA, on the science and everything. So that's why I invented this topic, that I know that it doesn't exist even in masters in ABA. I have not seen this topic, this classes like in all one masters, for example, and you have all those classes that I put, like sleep issues, OBM, behavioral gerontology, and everything that I am creating. But I think that this will give people a more strong foundational knowledge, and I think that that's where we are lacking of. People wants like recipes and to do it, and they don't want like frameworks. So I can give you a framework and you can work on this framework with your knowledge, and you will bring, like, for example, if you are an SLP, you will bring your previous knowledge to this new framework, and you will have a different perspective that I am from education, for example. So, and that's the beauty of a science, because I think that we can combine things and do other things and new things, and don't say, oh, we just need to do this and that, and if it doesn't work, oh, that's nothing that we can do about. So that's the beauty of creating science and working with behaviors, is to say that, okay, that's always a way. I didn't figure out yet, but there is always a way. So for me, that's so good, especially for me as a mom, because it gives us hope. And I think that's for all the population that will need our service. Kids, old people, everyone. Students with other disabilities. It gives us hope that it's possible. I just did not discover it yet, but it's possible. We can arrange things. We can try new things. So I think that that's why this topic will be so important, along with other classes, that it's, oh, I think that it will make people think like, oh, I have never thought about that. Oh, that's sure, I can do this and I can do that. And one thing that I want to ask you, that will be my last question, because I don't want to take so much of your time. But usually people, they struggle with ABA and psychotherapy. Most of people today, we had a post on our social media that it's the difference between ABA and psychotherapy. And ABA is not psychotherapy. But in Brazil, people, they fight with me. Like on social media, I have like haters who say, oh, you were wrong, lady, young lady. ABA is psychotherapy. And that's usually from people who are psychologists. And I say, okay. And I say to myself, okay, these people doesn't understand what is ABA, and that, yes, we can have a psychologist who works on clinical settings and he uses ABA as a basis of his or her psychotherapy. That's okay. Yeah. But what do we do as like ABA like therapists? Like in my case with autism kids, we are not doing psychotherapy. And for example, in your work with the services that you provide, you were not doing psychotherapy on your work, right?
No, it's interesting because I've never heard that before. I've never heard psychotherapy, ABA. Yeah. No, that's very strange. We definitely, so we definitely work with families. A lot of the families that we're working with, they're dealing with a lot. That generally their family member is deteriorating. They might forget who they are. There's a lot of grief involved, and not just grief about kind of the things that are happening, but grief that they're not getting, the person's still there, but they're not the person that they used to be. So there is a lot of things like that. And we also see a lot of depression and anxiety in older adults that goes unaddressed. Now for that, I would always refer to a clinical psychologist, because I am not the person to treat depression. I do not have training in that. That's not my role. And it's something that I have to kind of rule out and work with other professionals to make sure that that's not contributing to whatever behavior is going on. And while I can help with behavioral activation, I can't help with all the other aspects of depression and of treating depression. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. That's not something that we do. And especially because in my understanding, psychotherapy is generally a talk therapy, right? It's a talking therapy.
Yep. That's pretty much.
I think it reminds me, actually, I had a conversation with a good friend of mine who's an educational psychologist. And I think her and her colleagues have some kind of views about ABA that are definitely not necessarily what ABA is, but it's what they've heard or what they've seen people claiming to be ABA therapists do. And it was so funny because we were talking about the differences between ABA and her work as an educational psychologist. And she started talking about, one of the things that I quite often recommend is that the teacher should come along and provide some attention really regularly to prevent the behavior happening. And I was like, oh, non-contingent reinforcement. She was like, yeah, what? And I was like, yeah, that's we do that in ABA, non-contingent reinforcement. She was like, oh, okay. And then a few minutes later, she was talking about, so what we would do is a task analysis, and then we would backwards chain it. And I was like, hold on, that's ABA. And she's like, oh no, that's just part of my work as an educational psychologist. And I was like, no, that's ABA. You're using ABA. So I think quite often we can come to other professionals and we come with all of our words and all of our framework, and other people have found the answers as well. We are not the only people who have discovered reinforcement and differential reinforcement and stims. Other people have found that. They've just called it something different.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most valuable skills that you can have as a behavior analyst is understanding your science well enough to be able to talk in principles in their language. And that's so hard. And that's definitely something that is always an ongoing process. You're always developing your ability to mentally translate as you're talking to somebody in their language. But it makes a huge difference to how well you can get our science across to people, and how well you can work with other professionals. And ultimately, when you work collaboratively, that's when you get the best results for your clients. And for me, that's the most important aspect. You kind of put your behavioral pride aside,
Yeah.
and do what you need to do to get the right results for that client.
Make it accessible. That's
Yes.
one of the biggest bad things that we are heard about ABA. We don't make language accessible, but we can do that because we have like more traditional people that if we don't speak ABA, we are not being ABA so capable. If we don't use the right concepts, like in those words, sometimes we see someone who knows the things and understands it, but does not use it the exactly conceptual words, and this is seen as a lack of ability. And it was supposed to see as a good ability because it makes us more accessible to anyone, to other professionals, to families,
Yeah.
even to insurances companies,
Yeah.
for example, and everybody. So that's ability that we need to construct and do better. So
And
that's,
it's just stimulus control. The
yeah.
words that I would use speaking to another behavior analyst are not the words I would use speaking to a family member of someone with dementia. And those are also not the words that I would use when speaking to a different psychologist. Like, it's just stimulus control, and we as behavior analysts should know that better than anyone. And I
Yeah.
don't think we always do.
Yeah. Totally makes all sense. So I'm really happy to have all this content accessible to Brazil. I think that it will be huge because I think that we can reach other people who can go to behavioral gerontology, and we need these people all over the world, especially nowadays that we have our population living more, and that's great. That's huge. We talk so much about having a better life and aging healthily.
Yeah,
So I think that behavior gerontology will be like a big and powerful weapon to help everyone on that. So I'm really happy to spread the word about that. And oh, see, this exists. So go deeper, go do your trainings and higher consultation and supervision cases when they can. So I am really happy to bring this to people, especially to Brazil, who are we are so needy of this kind of content. So I'm really happy about, and I am really anxious about our class in our post graduation. And please put there those switches of difference that you talked about, preference assessment and functional analysis on
yes,
different perspectives, because I think that it will be so good to see like in action. Okay, so in a case I would do like that.
yeah,
I would not do like this. So I think that it will be huge for people, this kind of learning. So it will be
absolutely.
really good. So we are all really excited about, and I want really to thank you for your time and to being able to help us spread the word and spread behavioral gerontology.
Of course, and thank you so much. Thank you for being open and excited about behavioral gerontology, because that's kind of what matters to me. That's what we need more of.
Yeah, so we are delighted to have all that because as I like autism, I think that you have the same feeling on behavior gerontology. So if I can help people find what they love and do it well and provide them with the all the tools that they need and facilitate their acquisition of knowledge. This makes me really happy, no matter where they are working on. So really, really thank you. And we are waiting for your class on the post-graduation. And I will put on the links of this video all your websites and all your contacts, so people can reach you whenever they want. Okay.
Wonderful. That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I will let you go. Have a nice evening now, almost. Thank you. Bye-bye. See you
Lovely
soon.
to speak to you. Bye.
Bye.